Well, to quote the musical group EMF from the early 1990s, unbelievable. Oh, yeah, 31-30. If this were a race, the Sooners would have won by a whisker, and they probably would have won with only a few drops left in the gas tank. That's how close the Sooners came to blowing a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. And I know what people are going to be saying, okay? OU Sooner 56, don't you realize that Baker Mayfield didn't play in the second half? Don't you realize OU had injuries? Perine wasn't 100% after the ankle injury. Mixon was banged up as well, even though he continued to play. Don't you know that OU was handicapped? There's no excuse for what happened in this game in that fourth quarter where we saw OU completely melt down and almost choke this game away. And not taking anything away from T.C.U. because Gary Patterson's teams, will play hard regardless of the score. There's a reason why they're 9-1 entering this game. T.C.U. had not only just as many injuries entering this game, they've had to battle the injury bug all year long, especially on defense. So I don't want to hear the fact that, Mayfield didn't play in the second half. Something, you're at home, you're up 23-7, things are going your way. You got the game wrapped up if you continue to do what you did in the first half. And that is start the game by running effectively. Okay? If Trevor Knight is your backup quarterback, and if you don't think he can do certain things, let other players get the job done. And for some reason in that second half, Lincoln Riley was trying to get Knight to throw a little bit more often than was necessary. And what it did, it would basically freeze the Sooners. And also, too, Trevor Knight's a nice guy, pleasant person. I'm sure if you had a daughter about Trevor Knight's age and Trevor was dating her, you'd be proud because of the way Knight conducts himself off the field. He's a class act. When it comes to playing football, however, there's a reason why Baker Mayfield starts. There's a reason why Baker Mayfield is ahead of Trevor Knight in the depth chart. Yeah, Knight's got experience, but that Trevor Knight you saw 2 years ago in the Sugar Bowl is never coming back. He's not. And it's not just the fact that he still cannot read linebackers. It's not just the fact that he has a difficult time throwing anything that goes further than 10 yards, and even passes within 10 yards sometimes have a hard time finding location. Even the running backs, okay, where you have those dink passes, sometimes that doesn't fly. But he just does not, to me, have the confidence, at least outwardly, at least emotionally, that you see from other QBs, especially from Mayfield. I know he's not Baker Mayfield, but he just is kind of to himself, and to me, he does not feed energy off of anything, and the worst part is nobody feeds energy off him. In that second half, yeah, they did some good things in that third quarter, but it was mainly the running game. And the fourth quarter, OU only had 20 yards of total offense, a big reason why TCU nearly stole one in Norman. But I will say this, okay? I'll say thank you, Samaje Perine. You're one tough sucker. That big run in the third quarter, when it made it 30-13, you could tell he was in pain. You could tell a little bit of a limp on that ankle that he had hurt early in the third quarter. Thank you to Joe Mixon as well. He played with adversity as well. He was injured but came back. Thank you to Sterling Shepard, the only receiver tonight for the Sooners who had multiple catches. He had 8 catches. That's more than the other receivers and running backs had combined tonight. Also, too, a big thank you to Zach Sanchez for 2 picks. Ahmad Thomas had a pick, thank you. And, of course, Stephen Parker, when TCU got to within a point and stunned a lot of people, including yours truly, when Patterson said, you know what, we're going to try to win the game right now. Screw overtime. Let's try to win this game with a 2-point conversion. Probably a play that they had been saving. And Stephen Parker, yeah, he didn't get the sack, and yeah, he didn't get the interception. So what did he do? He was the only guy in between the quarterback and the receiver who's in the corner of the end zone. And if Parker doesn't leap up and get a piece of that ball, TCU is going to win the game. And so long for the Big 12 championship, and so long to that National College Football Playoff. But for at least one more week, the Sooners remain viable in that discussion. And again, the play of Perine and And for the most part, the defense, I mean, they played good except for those final 8 minutes. The final 8 minutes, which we'll talk about in a second, but prior to that, they had really held T.C.U. in check. They really had. And for T.C.U., you could tell that Trevon Boykin was so heavily missed. You know, they missed having his scrambling ability. They missed his burst of speed. But they missed his consistency as far as throwing the ball. And if you watch the game, you know that Foster Sawyer, who originally was a third-string quarterback, by the way, for T.C.U., but started in this game, and in the beginning did good. They had that 98-yard touchdown drive, and they were really picking on Jordan Thomas, the corner. Big problem that TCU had in this game was decision making. Okay, number one, the Horned Frogs kept going to the well too often. That deep pass down the left sideline, eventually OU figured it out and supplied safety help. That's where Thomas got a key pick in the third quarter, and eventually Sawyer got yanked. They put Bram Kohlhausen in, and Kohlhausen in the beginning looked even worse than Sawyer. At one point in this game, from the 13-minute mark of the third quarter to about the 8-minute mark of the fourth, about 20 minutes, TCU didn't even get a first down. And really when this game changed was when OU was up by 17, TCU's got the ball, I think at their own 14, and they catch Will Johnson, who had a great game against Kansas State. He's had these moments, but Johnson got caught turning around, and his receiver cut to the inside. Johnson trailed him, and the receiver that caught it for TCU had too much speed and outraced everybody. It made it a 10-point game, and it meant that the Sooners were going to have to do more than just run it 100% of the time. They were going to need Knight to make some plays, either with his feet or with his arm. Made a costly mistake by throwing it over the middle to a pass that never had a chance to be completed. And, TCU, I think, got a field goal off of that. And then, of course, TCU got the ball at the end. And the defense could not get stops. They just couldn't. And you give TCU credit. Again, people are going to say, well, the injuries were just too much for Oklahoma to name their score in this game. You got to find players that can step in. It's major college football. Okay, it's major college football. If you're a backup, it means one thing: you're one play away from being a starter, one play away from playing. So you got to be ready. And Trevor Knight, for the most part, was not. Stats don't lie. 5 of 16, 76 yards through the air, no TDs, 1 interception. And in the first half, I know that Baker Mayfield wasn't one of his best throwing games. He was 9 of 20, but remember, he had no interceptions, 2 touchdowns, and he had 42 yards rushing. But now, there are 2 big questions, okay, for the rest of the season. Number one, of course, is Baker Mayfield, his health. Of course, taking that headshot, that targeting from number 42 of TCU, that not only was an illegal play by number 42, it looked like just a flat-out intention to knock him out of the game completely. Hey, if I get knocked out, it's going to hurt you worse because you'll be without Baker Mayfield. Because that was clearly intentional and looked malicious to me. I don't care what anybody says. And it was an easy ejection that the officials had to verify. I don't even know why they had to look at replay of that. They just could have kicked him out of the game right at that spot, and I wish they had. A classless act, and no question, Mayfield, a tough sucker. He's not going to tell the coaches, hey, I'm wobbly. I can continue to play, and I think that's why he played the rest of that first half, despite the hit to the head. And he was at times affected, but you could tell that emotion was gone. When he was on the sideline, he was kind of in a daze. You can tell it in his eyes. And then at halftime, my guess is that, the coaches, but more importantly, the physicians, the doctors evaluated him, and for precaution purposes, and a smart call, he didn't play for the rest of the game. You got to be thinking about the players' health. You got to be thinking about their long-term and short-term future. Football's just a game, and we have to remember that. But if Mayfield can't go next week, if his condition is that bad, Oklahoma State's going to beat Oklahoma, okay? Because Trevor Knight can't get the job done. And I'm not trying to be a pessimist. I'm just being realistic. He cannot. Because Oklahoma State will prepare to, first of all, take out the run. And I don't think Oklahoma State believes that even with single covers on the receivers, that Knight can get the ball from point A to point B, a.k.a. point B being the receivers. The Sooners were fortunate to pull out a victory. But then again, Notre Dame the same way on Saturday night. They had 5 turnovers and had to hold on for dear life against Boston College. So in terms of who impressed the committee the most amongst, Oklahoma and Notre Dame, because it looks like it's going to come down to those two teams if both win next week as far as who gets that final playoff spot. Tonight it was a wash. Neither team looked impressive, although it looked like the Sooners, playing an injury-riddled T.C.U. team, at least scoreboard-wise, looked like they had the game in hand. But anything can happen in football, and with a Gary Patterson coach team, they seem to match up against OU pretty well. Last 4 games have been decided by 7 points or less, including last year's game, in which T.C.U. won by 4. But this one, limits the margins, a 1-point game. Thank you, Stephen Parker, again, for that big play. And I know several Sooners played a key role in this game. But the bottom line is that the Sooners got the win, and there is a fine line between winning and losing. Okay, it came that close to being a 32-31 win for TCU, but thankfully for the guys in Crimson and Cream, they wound up on the winning end of the scoreboard. And now, Thanksgiving week, it's time to get ready for Oklahoma State. And the Cowboys have got to be stunned because their national championship hopes, their playoff hopes, probably flushed down the toilet because their defense couldn't stop Baylor on Saturday. And give credit to Art Briles as well. Baylor, after that loss last week, not only didn't quit and treated Saturday night like a whole new season, and they took it out on Oklahoma State, but they did so with 2 different quarterbacks, each playing a half and each doing damage against the Cowboys. OSU will still be a tough game. OSU is always tough to beat at Boone Pickens. But, of course, the makeup of this game is going to really be predicated upon Baker Mayfield. I think if he plays, OU wins, and I think if he doesn't play, Sooners are not going to win. And it's just that simple to say. Probably my weekly matchup show of the Sooners and Cowboys Tuesday, so make sure you check that out as I will break down Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. It was a wild and woolly night, especially in Norman, but the Sooners are able to just get across that finish line with just a few drops of gas in the tank. And hey, I'm not going to apologize for my Sooners winning, even though I'm not sure after that game if they deserved it. But they got the win, 31-30. TCU, they're a good team, and they did so with several players out, including Boykin and, of course, Doxson. They're 2 best offensive players, and they still played Oklahoma toe-to-toe, wire-to-wire, and nearly pulled off an upset on a day where there were several close calls and several upsets. You can ask Oklahoma State and Ohio State, the 2 OSUs that. They lost on Saturday, and thankfully the Sooners did not follow suit. Thanks for watching. Boomer Sooner.